Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. I never thought I'd end up living alone in such a big house. It was an old, sprawling property, one of those places that seemed to carry more history than I could ever understand. After my divorce, it felt like the perfect place to start over. Quiet, private, and with enough space to rebuild my life. I bought it a little over 6 months ago and had been slowly trying to make it feel like home. But you know how some houses seem to hold memories that aren't yours? This one did. The first sign was the smell in the basement. It came out of nowhere, something between rusty metal and wet earth. I figured it was just mold or damp air and didn't pay much attention. The basement wasn't exactly inviting anyway. It was full of old boxes left behind by the previous owners, stacked in uneven piles. The wooden staircase creaked under every step, like the house itself was warning me to stay away. During the first few weeks, I went down there a couple of times to organize things but never stayed long. It was just storage, nothing more. Until one day I noticed something strange. Some boxes weren't where I'd left them. I thought maybe I was just distracted, but the smell was stronger, heavier. And that's when I saw it, a door. I was sure it hadn't been there before. It was a heavy wooden door with an old-fashioned lock, the kind you only see in old movies. Scratch marks covered the outside, like someone had tried to open it or keep something locked in. I couldn't understand how I'd missed it before. When I called the realtor, he was nothing unusual about the house. Maybe I just hadn't noticed it, I told myself. Still, it made me uneasy. Over the next few weeks, I tried to ignore it. Who cares about a random door in the basement, right? But then little things started happening. Tools went missing or I'd find them moved around. Once, I heard a faint creak coming from down there, but when I checked, everything was silent, except for the groaning stairs. The smell, though, got worse. It was no longer musty, it was foul, almost rotten. I started losing sleep, imagining all kinds of things. It felt like the basement was alive, or worse, that I wasn't alone in the house. Then came that Saturday night. I was watching a movie when I heard something again from the basement. It wasn't just a random noise. It was steady, muffled, like someone whispering through a wall. My heart raced. I froze, trying to make sense of it. Maybe pipes, maybe the wind, but it kept going. I grabbed a flashlight, my hands shaking, and went downstairs. The smell hit me hard. The door was open, just a crack, but I knew for sure I'd locked it before. I walked closer, every step heavier than the last. That's when I heard it, a whisper. I couldn't make out the words, but it was definitely a voice. My chest tightened. I wanted to run, but I couldn't move. I slammed the door shut, twisted the lock, and ran upstairs, locking the basement door behind me. I stayed awake all night with every light on. The next morning, I told myself it was just stress. I opened all the windows, trying to air out the smell and my nerves. But by sunset, I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed a crowbar from the garage and went back down. The air was thick, wet, and cold. The lock on the basement door had new scratches, fresh ones. My pulse pounded as I pried the lock open. It snapped with a loud crack. Behind the door was something I never expected. A narrow stone corridor that wasn't supposed to exist. The house blueprints showed nothing there. I shined my flashlight inside. The walls were made of rough stone, old and damp. Each step echoed, and the deeper I went, the heavier the air became. At the end was another door, older, darker, covered in strange carved symbols. I wanted to turn back, but something kept pulling me forward. My flashlight flickered as I pressed my ear against the wood. I heard deep, rhythmic breathing. My stomach twisted. Still, I pushed the door open. It groaned like it hadn't moved in decades. Inside was a small room lit by a dim yellow glow. In the center was an old chair, and sitting on it a doll. Not a normal one. Its face was rough fabric, its eyes stitched black, and its red painted smile stretched too wide. It faced a cracked mirror, its broken shards reflecting the room from every angle. It felt like being watched from all directions. On the floor near the doll, I saw words scratched into the wood. She watches. Do not touch. My throat went dry. Then, behind me, a whisper. I spun around, but no one was there. When I turned back, the doll's head was tilted. I was sure it had been straight before. Panic surged through me. I backed up fast and tripped over a red cord stretched across the floor. I hit the ground hard. The mirror shattered completely. The sound was deafening. It felt like the room itself was reacting to me. I ran to the door, but it had closed. I hadn't shut it, and that realization made my blood run cold. I pushed, pulled, kicked, but it wouldn't move. The flashlight flickered again, and in the shards of the broken mirror, I saw something moving. A shadow. I screamed, but my voice sounded distant, swallowed by the air. Then came the scratching. Slow at first, then faster, louder. Something was on the other side of that door, trying to get in. I hit it with the crowbar, desperate, tears blurring my vision. The smell was unbearable, like rot and rust mixed with blood. Then silence, thick, suffocating silence. And a voice right next to my ear whispering, "You shouldn't have come here." I dropped to my knees, gasping for air. My hand found the crowbar again, and with everything I had left, I smashed at the door until the wood splintered. Somehow, it finally gave way. I ran through the corridor, feeling the walls closing in around me. I didn't look back, but I could hear footsteps following. I sprinted up the basement stairs, slammed the door shut, and locked it. The police came after I called, but when they checked, everything was normal. The door was intact, as if it had never been broken. They said I must have imagined it, but I know what I saw. I know what I heard. I never went back down there. I paid a company to clear out everything, every box, every trace of what was down there. But even after it was empty, the smell stayed, faint. But there, I slept with the lights on for weeks, locking every door. Sometimes I'd wake in the night sure I heard footsteps below me. 3 months later, I sold the house. I didn't tell the new owners anything. How could I? I moved into a small apartment. No basement, no attic, no hidden doors. But sometimes, late at night, when the air feels heavy and still, I hear those words again, whispering in the dark. "You shouldn't have come here." And I wonder if I ever really left. My parents had never left me home alone before, but that weekend they didn't have a choice. It was an important trip, and since I was already 16, we all figured I could handle it. It was early October, and the days were getting shorter, which always made the house feel a little eerie. It wasn't that old, but when it was empty, it carried this heavy silence that made every sound echo. Without my parents, it felt even bigger, like the hallways had somehow stretched overnight. I spent most of Saturday watching TV and playing video games, trying to ignore the little creaks and random noises coming from the walls. I kept telling myself it was just the house settling. Everything was fine, until I saw him. I was in the kitchen grabbing a snack when I looked out the window and froze. There was a man standing near the fence in our backyard, staring directly at the house. He wasn't moving, just standing there in a worn brown coat, his face blank and weathered. I didn't recognize him, and I knew he wasn't from our neighborhood. For a few seconds, I just stared back, trying to make sense of it. Maybe he was looking for a lost dog, I thought, but he didn't look around. He just kept staring. I shut the curtains, locked the back door, and went back to the living room, convincing myself he'd eventually leave. But I couldn't stop thinking about him. Every creak outside made me flinch. An hour later, I gave in and peeked through a small gap in the curtain. He was still there, same spot, same posture. Only this time, his eyes met mine. Even from across the yard, I could feel him watching me. My stomach dropped. I yanked the curtain shut and backed away. I tried calling my dad, but he didn't answer. I texted him, no reply. The rest of the afternoon dragged by with me staring at the door, waiting for something to happen. When night came, the silence in the house felt unbearable. The darkness outside pressed against the windows. I locked every door and window, then went upstairs to my room, trying to tell myself it was over, that he must have left. Lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling, listening. Then I heard it, 3 taps on my bedroom window. Pause. 3 more. My breath caught, my whole body when I grabbed my phone, ready to call someone, but the tapping stopped. I forced myself to look. Nothing. Just my own reflection staring back at me. I sat there for a long time, trying to calm down, but I couldn't shake it. I decided to check the backyard again. I grabbed a flashlight and crept downstairs, turning on the porch light. My heart nearly stopped. There were footprints, big muddy ones, leading from the yard to the living room window, and the side gate was wide open. I knew I had locked it earlier. The fear hit me like a weight pressing on my chest. I bolted upstairs and locked my bedroom door. My hands were shaking. Then my phone buzzed. I thought maybe it was my dad finally texting back, but when I looked at the screen, my blood ran cold. It was an unknown number. The message said, "Nice place you have here. Mind if I stop by?" My heart pounded so hard I could barely breathe. I quickly texted back, "Who is this? How did you get my number?" The reply came instantly, "You left the kitchen door unlocked." I grabbed a knife from my nightstand and ran downstairs, terrified but desperate to prove it was just a joke. But when I checked, the kitchen door was locked. Every lock was in place. The message didn't make sense. Then another text came through, "Did you really think I was only outside?" I froze. My mind was racing. The idea that someone might be inside the house made me sick. I spun around, scanning every corner, every shadow. I had to get out. I crept toward the front door, clutching the knife. My hand shook so badly I could barely turn the key. When I finally opened it, I expected the quiet street. But instead, something was waiting. A small wooden figure sat on the porch, a crude doll, carved by hand. Its arms were uneven, its face twisted, its eyes hollow. It looked like it was staring straight at me. My stomach turned. I grabbed it with my free hand and threw it into the yard. Before I could step outside, my phone buzzed again. "Did you like the gift? There are more." That was it. I ran back inside and locked the door. I dialed 911, but the call wouldn't go through, just static. It felt like I was trapped in my own home. Something fell downstairs, a heavy thud, like a chair tipping over. The silence that followed was worse than the sound itself. I pressed my ear to the door, listening. Nothing. But I knew someone was there. Then another text lit up my screen. "I thought you were braver than this." I screamed, part fear, part rage. I couldn't take it anymore. I looked out the window, nothing. No footprints, no man, no movement. Just stillness. Then I heard it, footsteps on the stairs. Slow, deliberate, heavy. My heart hammered in sync with each one. They stopped right outside my door. The knob didn't move, but I could feel someone there. The air was thick, suffocating. Then my phone buzzed again. "Open the door. I want to see you." I stared at the knob, my hands trembling around the knife. I couldn't move. The scratching started next. Long, slow drags across the wood. Nails or claws. I couldn't tell. Then a low, muffled laugh, deep and wrong. It wasn't human. I typed one final message with shaking fingers. "Whoever you are, I'm calling the cops." Seconds later, the reply came, "Call whoever you want. They won't get here in time." That broke me. I looked at my window. It opened onto the garage roof. Without thinking, I climbed out and jumped. The landing hurt, but I didn't stop. I ran, barefoot and terrified, across the roof and into the yard, straight toward the street. When I finally reached it, I dialed 911 again, and this time it went through. I hid behind a tree across from the house while explaining everything to the operator. As I watched, the living room light flicked on. A figure stood in the window. Not me. The police arrived a few minutes later. I ran to them, barely able to speak. They checked the house top to bottom and came back shaking their heads. "There's no one inside," one of them said. "All the doors and windows are locked." "Are you sure about what you saw?" I tried to explain the texts, the footprints, the doll. They took my phone to trace the number, but said it was probably a prank. I knew it wasn't. They told me to stay with someone else that night, so I called my uncle, who lived a few blocks away. Even with the police there, I couldn't look at the house without feeling sick. When my uncle picked me up, I didn't say a word. The next morning, my parents came home. I told them everything, and my dad immediately checked the security footage. What we found made my skin crawl. The cameras showed the man standing by the fence for hours, but they never showed him leaving. The doll, it wasn't there at all. It was like none of it had ever happened, except for the messages on my phone. They were still there. Real. I moved out a few months later and never saw the man again. But sometimes, late at night, when the world is too quiet, I swear I feel eyes on me, and I can't help but wonder, did he ever really leave? Or is he still waiting for me to be alone again? I'd only been living in that apartment for about 3 months. It was one of those tall buildings you find in any big city, endless hallways, neighbors who pass by without even looking up. The location was perfect for my job downtown, but my schedule was so hectic that I barely had time to enjoy the place. Most nights I came home late, arms full of groceries, and collapsed straight onto the couch. That night I remember being especially tired. I just stepped out of the shower, wrapped myself in a robe, when I heard a knock at the door. It wasn't gentle. It was firm, impatient, the kind that makes your heart skip for no reason. I opened the door with one hand still holding my wet hair. Standing there was a man in his 40s wearing a beige uniform with a logo stitched on the chest. He looked official, but something about him felt wrong. Maybe it was his overly wide smile, or how his eyes lingered on me for a second too long. "Good evening, ma'am," he said. "I'm from maintenance. We're checking for a possible leak on this floor. I need to inspect your plumbing." My first thought was, no one told me about this. But he seemed calm, professional, even casual. I didn't want to be rude, so I stepped aside and let him in. He walked straight to the kitchen like he already knew the layout. I followed, clutching my robe tighter, watching as he crouched to open the cabinet under the sink. "Everything looks fine here," he said after a moment, "but I'll need to check your bathroom too." His voice was neutral, almost mechanical, but the unease in my stomach grew. His uniform was spotless, too clean for someone supposedly fixing pipes all day, and he wasn't carrying any tools, just a clipboard that looked more like a prop. Still, I told myself I was overreacting and led him to the bathroom. He opened the cabinet beneath the sink again and began tapping the walls inside, pausing every few seconds. "Do you live here alone?" he asked suddenly. That question made my blood run cold. I forced a tight smile. "Yeah." He nodded slowly, as if filing that detail away in his mind. After a few more minutes, he stood up. "Everything's in order," he said flatly. Then, without another word, he walked out, leaving his clipboard on the kitchen counter. When the door closed, the silence in the apartment felt heavy. Something about that whole encounter felt off. Over the next few days, I tried to convince myself it was nothing, just a weird maintenance visit. But then small things started changing. One morning, my coffee maker was sitting on the opposite counter from where I always kept it. I brushed it off. Maybe I'd moved it without realizing. Then a cabinet door I always kept shut was slightly open when I woke up. The breaking point came when I found a black lighter on the coffee table. I don't smoke, and I never have visitors. My hands started to shake as I picked it up. That's when I called building management to ask about the supposed inspection. The woman on the phone sounded confused. She told me there hadn't been any maintenance scheduled recently, and any upcoming ones were always announced in advance. It felt like the floor dropped out from under me. Who was that man, and what had he really been doing in my apartment? I tore the place apart, searching every corner. Nothing in the kitchen, nothing in the bathroom. But in the bedroom, behind my bedside lamp, I found it, a small black device, no bigger than a key fob with a tiny lens. A camera. My heart pounded so hard I could barely think. I carefully set it on the table, grabbed a pair of tweezers, and opened a flap on the back. Inside was a memory card. When I inserted it into my laptop, the videos nearly made me sick. There were recordings, not just of my apartment, but of other apartments too. People cooking, sleeping, getting dressed, completely unaware they were being watched. And then, I saw my own face. Clips of me scrolling through my phone, brushing my hair, walking around my apartment in a robe. Someone had been watching me, living my life through that hidden lens. I called the police immediately. I told them everything, from the fake maintenance man to the hidden camera. They told me not to touch anything else, and that a team was on the way. That hour waiting for them was the longest of my life. Every sound in the hallway made my heart race. I locked the door, closed the curtains, and sat in the kitchen clutching a knife. When the officers arrived, I finally felt a flicker of safety. They took the camera and memory card, assuring me they'd investigate. But when they left, the silence came back, heavier than before. The next morning, the police called. They confirmed what I already feared. The man wasn't from maintenance. The device was under analysis, but they hadn't identified him yet. "Change your locks," the officer said. "And if you can, maybe think about moving out." That line hit me hard. It felt like she knew more than she could say. That night I heard it again, knocking at the door. This time it was soft, hesitant. My heart pounded as I crept toward the peephole. The hallway was empty. I stepped back, trying to convince myself it was nothing. Then the knocks came again, louder. I called the police, shaking, barely able to get the words out. They said someone was on the way. I locked myself in the bathroom, gripping my phone. That's when I heard it, heavy footsteps outside, followed by a dragging sound against the door. Then, silence. When the police finally arrived, the hallway was empty again. But on my door were deep scratch marks, and a chalk symbol drawn just above the handle. The officers exchanged glances. One of them took photos. "Shen this before?" he asked. I shook my head. "Could be some kind of message." He muttered, "You should stay somewhere else for a few days." I didn't argue. That night, I stayed with a friend, jumping at every noise. I barely slept. The next morning, I brought a security technician to the apartment. He used high-tech equipment to sweep for hidden devices. When he got to the bedroom, he froze. There was another one, a tiny microphone, buried inside the baseboard. He told me it could only transmit over a short distance, meaning whoever was listening had to be close, maybe even in the same building. That was the final straw. I packed everything and started planning to move. But even as I boxed up my things, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still being watched. On my last day there, while emptying a kitchen cabinet, I found something else. An envelope tucked behind a shelf. Inside was a photo of my apartment building. My window was circled in red. You could see my silhouette through the glass. The photo didn't look recent. It looked like it had been taken the day I moved in. I handed it over to the police, packed the last of my things, and left that apartment for good. They said they'd keep investigating, but I never heard any real updates. Now I live in a different place under a new number, new locks, new everything. But sometimes, late at night, when the air goes still, I still feel it. That prickling sense that someone's watching. And I can't help but think, maybe I didn't really leave it all behind. Maybe he's still out there, waiting.